What would you do if you paid for a first-class seat, but were told you didn't belong there? What if the color of your skin was enough for someone to strip you of dignity at 30,000 feet on an ordinary flight? One man's quiet strength collided with an airline's prejudice. Jordan Ellis, a powerful CEO worth billions, boarded his plane just like any other passenger. But before takeoff, a confrontation erupted that would spiral far beyond the cabin walls. Phones began recording. Voices rose, and the world was suddenly watching a battle over something far greater than a seat. Would Jordan bow to humiliation, or stand firm against the weight of a system designed to silence him? Could one act of defiance ignite a movement powerful enough to shake an entire industry? And what price would he pay for daring to demand something so simple, yet so profound dignity? This is not just a story about a man on a plane. It is about power, injustice, and the fight for respect in a world too quick to take it away. If you're ready to witness it, hit like, share this story, and subscribe now, because this is where it begins. Jordan Ellis stepped onto Skyway's Air Flight 317 with the calm precision of a man who had traveled this route 100 times before. The late afternoon bustle at JFK's Terminal 4 faded behind him as he moved into the hushed luxury of the first-class cabin. He carried no entourage, no flashy watch, no need to signal power, just a slim leather briefcase, his folded copy of the Financial Times, and that quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are without needing anyone else's validation. He found his seat, 1A, the coveted window spot at the very front. He placed the newspaper in the seat pocket, slid his briefcase carefully into the overhead bin, and lowered himself with a sigh that was half fatigue, half relief. Business had been relentless these past few weeks. The board of Ellis Global Partners was waiting on his decision about the $500 million merger with Skyway's Air. His signature alone would tip the balance, either green-lighting the deal or shutting it down. But for now, Jordan allowed himself one rare luxury silence. He opened his notebook, the leather edges worn soft by years of use. On the first page of a new section, he wrote a single word in steady block letters: dignity. He let the ink dry, then leaned back and closed his eyes, breathing in the faint blend of coffee, leather, and recirculated air. He thought of his father, a mechanic from Atlanta, who had once told him, "Son, you don't raise your voice in a world that already shouts at you. You let your silence be the sharpest answer." The piece lasted 3 minutes. "Sir." The voice was sharp, clipped. Jordan opened his eyes to see a flight attendant hovering over him, arms crossed tightly. Her name tag read Rebecca Sloan. She was in her late 30s, hair pulled back in a neat bun, lips pressed into a line of authority. Yes, Jordan's voice was calm, almost disarmingly so. "This seat is reserved," Rebecca said flatly. "You'll need to move to your assigned class of service." Jordan blinked, then slowly pulled his boarding pass from his jacket pocket. He handed it to her without a word. Rebecca scanned it quickly, then frowned. This can't be right. Behind her, a tall white man in a gray suit shifted impatiently. His briefcase dangled from one hand, his platinum card lanyard gleaming from the other. Thomas Granger. He was the kind of man who carried himself as though every space automatically belonged to him. "That's my seat," Thomas said, voice full of impatience. "1A, Platinum Elite, 10 years running. I take this route every month." Rebecca nodded at him, then turned back to Jordan. "Sir, we'll need to verify your credit card. Standard procedure. Jordan's jaw flexed, but his tone stayed level. "I've already purchased the ticket." Thomas let out a laugh, quick and cutting. "Look, let's not waste time here. Just move him. I have meetings in San Francisco tonight." A murmur stirred among the other passengers. Some shifted uncomfortably, others looked away. A young black woman in seat 2C, Alicia Monroe, pulled out her phone and angled it discreetly toward the scene. Her voice, a whisper into the mic, carried conviction, first-class racism, happening right now. Rebecca's hand tightened on the boarding pass. "Sir, cooperate, or we'll have to call security." Jordan leaned back in his seat, folding his hands over the notebook still open on his lap. Inside, his thoughts churned. He remembered the countless times in his career he'd been second-guessed, carded, questioned, in boardrooms, at five-star hotels, at golf clubs where his membership was assumed to be a mistake. Always the same script: prove you belong, over and over, until belonging itself felt like a performance. This time, he thought, not again. He looked at Rebecca with a calmness that unnerved her. "What security concern does my skin color raise?" he asked softly. Rebecca's lips parted, but no words came. Thomas scoffed loudly. "Oh, come on. Don't make this about race. It's about status. He doesn't look like someone who belongs in first class." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Alicia's live stream was already filling with comments. "Wow." He said the quiet part out loud. "Sue them." Name the airline. Jordan inhaled slowly, letting the moment stretch. Silence had power, his father used to say, and right now, silence was louder than any argument he could make. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably, then stiffened again. "Sir, last chance. Either provide another form of payment for verification, or we'll have security escort you off this aircraft." The murmur in the cabin deepened. A couple in row 3 exchanged uneasy looks. A man in 1B shifted as though ready to intervene, then thought better of it. Phones glowed everywhere now, recording, documenting. Jordan looked down at the word in his notebook. Dignity. He closed it carefully, slid it into the briefcase overhead, and adjusted his seatbelt as though preparing for takeoff. His movements were precise, deliberate, full of quiet defiance. "Call security," he said finally. His tone wasn't resignation, it was challenge. Rebecca faltered. Thomas smirked. Alicia whispered into her phone, "You're about to witness something big." And, in that moment, the ordinary hum of a boarding cabin turned into the stage for a confrontation that would shake an entire industry. The cabin was tense, every sound magnified, the rustle of newspapers, the click of overhead bins, even the faint hum of the ventilation seemed louder. Jordan Ellis sat in seat 1A, composed, his face unreadable. Across from him, Rebecca Sloan held the boarding pass as if it were a fraudulent document. "Sir," she said again, her voice sharpening, "you have not provided sufficient proof of purchase. For first class, we require verification of the original card used." Jordan's response was steady. "I purchased the ticket through my company account. That is sufficient. It always has been." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. She had worked this route for 8 years, and she knew how to project authority. Yet something about Jordan's stillness unsettled her. He did not fidget, did not argue, did not bow to the implied hierarchy. His calmness was not submission. It was something else, something that made her words sound less certain. Thomas Granger stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the aisle floor. "Look, Rebecca, There's no need to argue. This is ridiculous. Just reassign his seat. I'm Platinum Elite. I have priority. The way he said it, priority, sounded less like a loyalty status and more like a divine right. Jordan turned his head slightly, meeting Thomas's gaze. For the briefest moment, their eyes locked. Jordan's expression remained neutral, but his silence spoke volumes. Thomas looked away first, muttering under his breath, but loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "Some people just don't get it. Not everyone belongs up here." Gasps rippled quietly among the seats. A woman in row 3 raised her phone higher, clearly recording. Another passenger shook his head but said nothing. The first-class cabin, usually a sanctuary of hushed privilege, was becoming a courtroom without walls. Alicia Monroe, phone in hand, angled her camera toward Jordan and whispered for her live stream audience. "They're trying to kick this man out of his seat. He's calm, polite, has his ticket, and look who they're siding with. Watch closely. This is America, 2025, right here on Flight 317. Comments flooded across her screen. Name the airline. Don't stop recording. This needs to go viral." Rebecca took a step back and folded her arms. "Sir, if you refuse to cooperate, I will call security to escort you off this plane. You are disrupting the boarding process." Jordan's lips curved into something between a smile and a sigh. Disruption. I have not raised my voice, not moved from my seat, not broken any policy. The only disruption here is the discomfort of others at the sight of me occupying what I paid for. Rebecca bristled, stung by the precision of his words. Authority usually worked best when met with compliance or fear. But this man did not fear her, and that shook her. Thomas laughed bitterly, shaking his head, always playing the victim, always pulling the race card. This is about procedure, not prejudice. Jordan's eyes flicked to Thomas, then back to Rebecca. "Then follow your procedure. Show me the policy that requires additional verification for me, but not for him." Rebecca faltered. She had no written rule, only an instinct she could no longer defend without exposing its prejudice. Her silence hung heavy, more damning than any admission. The passengers felt it. The tension was no longer invisible. People shifted in their seats, phones angled, eyes wide. Some whispered to one another. Others stared at Jordan with a mix of pity and admiration. Inside, Jordan's thoughts moved like deep currents. He remembered his father again, a man who had endured humiliation after humiliation in quiet defiance. He remembered his mother, who told him, "Dignity is the only thing they can't take unless you hand it over." He thought of boardrooms where his voice had been dismissed until the numbers proved him right. He thought of hotel clerks who double-checked his ID, rental agents who asked if he could afford the car he reserved. Always the same script. Always the quiet test, prove yourself again, and again, and again. He looked around at the passengers, at the silent witnesses who would either stand by or speak up. His heart tightened as he wondered how many times had people just like them watched and done nothing. How many times had silence protected injustice? Rebecca's hand hovered near her intercom. Her jaw was clenched, but her eyes betrayed doubt. Still, she pressed forward. "Sir, last warning. Security will be called." Before Jordan could answer, Alicia's voice rose, not to the crew but to her live stream. "He's done nothing wrong. They're harassing him because he's black. Everyone watching this, remember his face. Remember this airline." The live stream count ticked upward. 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 viewers. Comments scrolled in real time. This is outrageous. Hold them accountable. Who is this man? Jordan heard Alicia's words, and for the first time that day, he felt the weight of his choice. He could de-escalate, quietly move to another seat, preserve his own peace, or he could resist. Not with anger, but with presence, with the refusal to yield to a script written long before this flight. The thought gnawed at him. Was it pride? Was it justice? Was it vengeance? He closed his eyes briefly, as if listening to a voice deep within. His father's lessons, his mother's counsel, the years of holding steady under pressure, they all converged here, in this cramped cabin, before takeoff. Thomas's voice broke the silence. What's the holdup? Just move him already. People like him don't sit in seats like this. Gasps now turned into whispers of outrage. One man muttered, "Unbelievable." Another said, "I can't believe he said that out loud." Jordan opened his eyes and looked directly at Rebecca. "Call security, if that's the route you want. But remember this moment, because it's not just between you and me anymore. It's between this airline and the truth the world is watching." Rebecca hesitated, her authority cracking under the weight of so many eyes, so many cameras. Thomas rolled his eyes, scoffing, but even he seemed unsettled by the shifting energy. Jordan remained perfectly still, hands folded on his lap, posture straight, gaze unwavering. The air in the cabin felt electric, charged with the unspoken awareness that something larger than a seat dispute was unfolding. The cabin door was still open, boarding still in progress, but already the atmosphere inside the aircraft had shifted from routine to historic. Jordan inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of history pressing on his shoulders, yet also the unyielding strength in his chest. He would not move. Not this time. And as Alicia whispered into her phone, "This is bigger than one man. This is a moment." Jordan Ellis prepared himself for the storm that was about to break. The aisle of the first-class cabin had turned into a silent stage, the kind where every glance, every breath carried meaning. Jordan Ellis remained seated in 1A, still as stone, while Rebecca Sloan stood rigidly in front of him. Thomas Granger shifted from foot to foot, brimming with impatience, his entitlement filling the space more than his tall frame ever could. Alicia Munro's phone captured it all, her quiet commentary a counterbalance to the tension building around them. The air inside the plane was thick with anticipation. The boarding door was still open, more passengers trickling in, but all eyes were now drawn to the conflict at the front. The smell of jet fuel seeped faintly through the vents, mixing with the sterile chill of conditioned air. A little boy in row 4 whispered to his mother, "Why won't they let him sit?" The mother hushed him, her gaze fixed forward. Rebecca lifted her chin. "Sir, you are disrupting this flight. If you continue to resist our instructions, I will have no choice but to call for removal." Jordan leaned back slightly, his voice low, smooth and deliberate. Disruption implies chaos. "Look at me. Do I look chaotic to you?" Her lips tightened. "You're refusing to follow crew instructions." Jordan held her gaze. "I am refusing to surrender my dignity." Thomas let out an exaggerated groan. "Oh, for God's sake, this is ridiculous. We've wasted 15 minutes already. Just move him." Rebecca turned to Thomas with a nod, as if his impatience justified her authority. Then she swung back to Jordan. "This is your final warning." Jordan's hand moved slowly, carefully, to his pocket. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. For a brief second, silence held, as if everyone were waiting to see if he would call a lawyer, a reporter, maybe even the police. But instead, he swiped across his home screen and opened his messages. Inside, he saw the string of texts from his board of directors. Ready for merger vote. Skyway's air deal needs your approval. Market waiting for signal. He felt the irony like a weight pressing on his chest. Here he was, being questioned, threatened with removal from a seat he had legally purchased, while at the very same moment, he held in his hand the power to approve or destroy a deal that would determine the future of the very airline now humiliating him. His thumb hovered over the phone, then lowered it back to his lap. Not yet. Timing mattered. He glanced at Alicia, whose phone glowed in the dim cabin light. She mouthed, "It's live?" Jordan gave the faintest nod. Thomas was louder now, his voice designed to echo down the cabin. "This is about rules. He doesn't follow them. He doesn't belong here. Some of us earn this seat with loyalty and status," a woman across the aisle muttered. "And some of us pay for it." She wasn't loud, but it was enough to draw a ripple of agreement from others nearby. Jordan sat perfectly upright, but inside his thoughts churned. Should he reveal himself now? Should he tell them that the man they were threatening to drag off the plane was the very man negotiating a $500 million deal with their airline? Would they even believe him? Or would they think it was arrogance? Another black man playing a card he wasn't supposed to hold. He closed his eyes for a moment, hearing his father's voice echoing in memory. "Son, you don't show your power just to prove them wrong. You wait. You wait until the world is watching. Then you let them trap themselves in their own injustice." His eyes opened again, clear, sharp. He knew now this was that moment. Rebecca tapped her intercom. "Gate supervisor to the aircraft immediately. We have a non-compliant passenger in first class." The words landed like a gavel. Gasps spread through the cabin. Thomas smirked. Satisfied, Alicia whispered into her phone. "They're calling backup. He hasn't moved, hasn't raised his voice, but they're calling him non-compliant. Watch this. Just watch." Jordan adjusted his seatbelt across his lap, slow and deliberate. His heart thudded, but his expression never changed. Calm, measured, immovable. The gate supervisor arrived minutes later, her heels clicking against the jet bridge floor before she stepped into the cabin. Linda Carver, tall, stern, with an air of corporate loyalty, approached Rebecca first. They exchanged hushed words, then both turned toward Jordan. "Sir," Linda said, her voice rehearsed, almost mechanical. "We've been informed that you are refusing to follow crew instructions. If you do not cooperate, you will be escorted off this aircraft by security personnel." Jordan studied her for a moment. "And what, exactly, have I refused to do?" Linda hesitated. Rebecca jumped in. "He has not verified his purchase properly and is occupying a premium seat reserved for another customer." Jordan's voice cut cleanly through the air. "My boarding pass shows seat 1A. It was issued by your system. I have done nothing but sit here. The only refusal here is your refusal to accept that this seat belongs to me." Linda's mask of authority cracked for the briefest moment. Then she hardened again. "Sir, please step off the aircraft." The cabin erupted in whispers. Passengers were no longer passive observers. They were unsettled jurors, watching injustice unfold in real time. Phones tilted higher. Some shook their heads. Others looked away, unwilling to meet Jordan's eyes. Inside. Jordan's pulse raced. A storm brewed within him, anger at the humiliation, sorrow at the predictability of it, and a steel-hard resolve not to yield. He thought of the countless times his worth had been questioned in rooms where he held the highest authority. This, he realized, was just another boardroom, except the table was a tray, and the witnesses were strangers with phones. His phone buzzed again. A message from his COO Markets waiting. "We need your decision." Jordan exhaled slowly, then reached for his briefcase. He opened it, removed his leather notebook, and laid it across his lap. On the page still sat the single word he had written before boarding: dignity. He tapped the word with his finger once, as if grounding himself. Then he slid his phone onto the notebook, unlocked it, and dialed. The cabin went eerily quiet as he pressed the speakerphone icon. A voice answered instantly. "Mr. Ellis?" "Yes, David," Jordan said, his voice steady. "Cancel the merger vote, effective immediately. Execute full divestment from Skyways Air. File a federal discrimination complaint within the hour." The cabin froze. Rebecca's eyes widened. Linda paled. Thomas's smirk fell from his face. "Sir, understood," came the voice from the phone. "I'll notify the board." Gasps rippled through the passengers. Phones tilted higher, live streams exploding. Thomas blurted out, "Wait, who the hell are you?" Jordan's gaze turned to him, calm, unflinching. "The man who was about to fund your platinum privileges." The weight of his words dropped like thunder in the cabin. Alicia whispered into her phone, "You heard that. You all heard that. This isn't just a passenger. This is the man holding $500 million over this airline." Rebecca's hands trembled. Linda's voice cracked. "Mr. Ellis, please, let's discuss this." But Jordan Ellis only leaned back in seat 1A, folding his hands calmly across his lap, the eye of a storm that had just begun. The atmosphere in the cabin was no longer routine. It was electric, thick, alive with the weight of revelation. Phones glowed from nearly every row, capturing the moment that had already begun to ripple beyond the walls of the aircraft. Jordan Ellis had not raised his voice. He had not moved from his seat. Yet his calm words had shifted the entire balance of power. Rebecca Sloan stood frozen, her authority crumbling with every second of silence. Her hands clutched her tablet as if the plastic frame could anchor her. Beside her, Linda Carver's corporate mask was slipping, her jaw tense as she realized the magnitude of the mistake spiraling in real time. Thomas Granger, once smug and self-assured, now seemed disoriented, as though the ground had shifted beneath him and left him standing exposed. Jordan leaned back in 1A, posture relaxed, voice level. "You called this a disruption. Let's be clear. The only disruption here is the truth you're trying to suppress." Before anyone could respond, two figures appeared at the cabin entrance. Officer Ramirez and Officer Collins, airport security in dark uniforms, stepped down the aisle with practiced authority. Their radios crackled softly, their boots heavy against the carpeted floor. Rebecca straightened instantly, relief flickering across her face. She gestured sharply. "Officers, this passenger is refusing to comply with instructions. He needs to be removed immediately." Gasps and murmurs filled the cabin. Alicia Monroe's voice, hushed but steady into her phone, carried the tension outward. "Security has boarded. He's still calm, still seated. Everyone watching. You're seeing it with your own eyes." Ramirez stopped in front of Jordan, his hand resting near his belt. "Sir, we've been called because of a report of noncompliance. We're asking you to step off the aircraft." Jordan met his gaze steadily. "Officer, I'm sitting in the seat my boarding pass assigned me. I've not resisted. I've not shouted. I've not moved. What policy, exactly? Have I violated?" Collins glanced at Rebecca. "Crew says you refused instructions." Jordan's reply was even cutting. "Crew gave me instructions rooted not in policy, but in prejudice. Ask her to show you the regulation that requires me to provide more proof than any other passenger." Rebecca's cheeks flushed, but her voice sharpened. "This is about procedure, not prejudice. He cannot provide the verification we asked for." Jordan's voice lowered, calm yet commanding. "I purchased this seat through my company. Your system issued my boarding pass. That is verification. What you are demanding now is not procedure. It is suspicion. Suspicion applied only to me." The officers hesitated. They were used to clear cases of drunkenness, belligerence, or threats. Here sat a man in a tailored suit, speaking with precision, refusing to raise his voice. The optics were dangerous, and they knew it. Ramirez shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, perhaps we can resolve this outside the cabin." Jordan shook his head. "No, because stepping off this plane quietly allows the lie to survive, and I will not fuel that lie any longer." The silence that followed was suffocating. Thomas broke it with a frustrated scoff. "This is absurd. Just drag him out already. He's holding everyone up." A passenger in row 2 finally spoke, his voice firm. "He's not holding us up. You are." Whispers of agreement stirred. Someone clapped softly once, then stopped, unsure. Rebecca's authority, once unquestioned, was dissolving before her eyes. She looked at Linda for backup. Linda's face had drained of color, but her corporate instincts pushed her forward. "Officers, remove him. We cannot delay this flight any longer." Jordan's phone buzzed again on his lap. He picked it up, pressed a button, and placed it back on the notebook for all to hear. A voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Ellis, we've already begun executing your order. Skyway's air shares are dropping as we speak. Do you wish to release the public statement now?" The cabin gasped. Ramirez and Collins exchanged glances. Rebecca's mouth fell open. Linda took an involuntary step back. Thomas stuttered. "Wait. Wait. Who are you?" Jordan's eyes never left Linda's. "The man whose company was about to finalize a $500 million deal with yours. The man you tried to humiliate out of a seat he paid for." The cabin erupted. Murmurs turned into outright conversations, disbelief clashing with outrage. Alicia's phone shook slightly as her live stream viewer count surged into the tens of thousands. Her voice trembled with adrenaline. "You're all hearing this live. This man is Jordan Ellis, CEO of Ellis Global Partners, and he just pulled out of a $500 million merger with Skyway's Air on this plane, in this seat." Rebecca's face drained of color. Linda stammered, "Mr. Ellis, I think we should resolve this privately." Jordan leaned forward slightly, his voice steady but edged with iron. "Resolve it privately. You tried to strip me of dignity publicly. Now you can face the consequences publicly." Thomas sank into a nearby seat, his bravado shattered. This is crazy. You can't do this." Jordan turned to him. Calm as ever. "I already have." Ramirez cleared his throat, breaking the charged silence. "Sir, with all due respect, It doesn't look like you've done anything wrong here. If you're choosing to remain in your seat, we have no grounds to remove you," Rebecca snapped. "You can't just ignore a crew order." Collins' tone was cool. "Ma'am, we also can't justify removing a compliant passenger who has a valid boarding pass, especially not with all these cameras on us." He gestured subtly at the glowing phone surrounding them. The weight shifted again. Rebecca's authority, already crumbling, disintegrated completely. Linda's corporate training was failing her. Thomas sat pale and silent, his platinum card powerless. The only steady voice in the storm was Jordan's, unwavering. He folded his hands across his lap. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who has ever been told they don't belong, despite following every rule. It's about every humiliation endured in silence. Today, silence ends." Applause broke out, scattered at first, then swelling into something undeniable. The first-class cabin, a place built on exclusivity, had transformed into a stage of collective witness. Alicia whispered into her phone, voice breaking. "You're seeing history, right here, on a flight that hasn't even left the ground." Jordan leaned back, closing his eyes briefly, centering himself. The fight was not over. He knew. The airline would scramble, the media would pounce, the story would spiral beyond his control. But for now, in this suspended moment, he had won something more powerful than leverage or contracts. He had claimed his seat not just on the plane, but in the broader battle for dignity. And as the cabin settled into a charged, uneasy quiet, everyone knew the real turbulence was only just beginning. The cabin had fallen into a silence that was heavier than turbulence. Every passenger sat with their attention glued to the front row, where Jordan Ellis remained calm, poised, and resolute. The tension that had once been a battle of authority was now a quiet reckoning. Rebecca Sloan stood stiff, her professional veneer fractured. The authority she had worn like armor was slipping away in front of dozens of cameras and thousands of live-stream viewers. Every attempt she made to reassert control only seemed to expose her further. Her voice faltered. Her eyes darted nervously toward Linda Carver. Linda herself was unraveling. The gate supervisor's training had prepared her to enforce rules, but not to face a man who, with one phone call, had shifted the financial axis of the airline. She had built her career on loyalty to the company, but loyalty now felt like a sinking ship. Thomas Granger sat slouched in his seat, visibly shaken. His earlier arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind only the embarrassment of having revealed his prejudice in a moment recorded and broadcast worldwide. His platinum status, his years of accumulated miles, all felt trivial in comparison to the quiet storm Jordan had unleashed. And Jordan sat in seat 1A, a portrait of composure. His leather notebook rested on his lap, the word dignity etched across the page like a compass guiding his every move. He had not shouted, had not moved, had not bowed to humiliation. And now, the balance of power in the cabin had shifted completely toward him. Officer Ramirez adjusted his stance, glancing from Jordan to the airline staff. "We can't justify removing him. He's shown no aggression, no violation. The risk here isn't him, it's the optics of forcing out someone who has done nothing wrong," Collins added. "And with this many witnesses, with this many cameras, you don't want that kind of fallout. Trust me." Linda tried to steady herself, though her voice cracked under the strain. We can resolve this privately once we're in the air." Jordan's gaze turned toward her, sharp but measured. You tried to make this public the moment you questioned whether I belonged here. Privacy is not a luxury you can reclaim now. A murmur of agreement rolled through the passengers. Alicia Monroe's voice, whispering to her live stream, carried conviction. He's turning the entire narrative. They wanted him silent, but he's making the world listen. Rebecca finally spoke again, her voice higher, defensive. I was only following procedure. Jordan's eyes softened, but his words cut through her defense. Procedure is a shield when it is consistent, but when it shifts depending on the person in front of you, it becomes prejudice dressed in uniform. Do you understand that Rebecca swallowed hard? Her lips pressed tight. She had no reply. Jordan leaned back, his voice steady and clear enough for the whole cabin to hear. This is not about a seat. It never was. This is about the quiet assumption that I do not belong, about the silent calculation that my presence must be verified, justified, questioned, while others are waved through without a glance. Today, I refuse to accept that calculation. The cabin erupted in soft applause again, stronger this time, carrying further. Some passengers clapped openly. Others nodded with conviction. Even those who had remained silent were visibly shifting in support. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat, muttering, "This is ridiculous. He's just making it about race." A passenger across the aisle, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, snapped her gaze toward him. "He's not making it about race." "You did, the moment you said he didn't look like someone who belonged here." Thomas's face flushed crimson, his voice dying in his throat. He looked down at his shoes, wishing the carpet could swallow him. Jordan's phone buzzed again. He answered quickly, putting it on speaker once more. The voice of his COO carried across the cabin. "Mr. Ellis, news outlets are already picking up the live stream. Skyway's air stock is plummeting. Do you want us to hold a press conference tonight?" Jordan replied calmly. "Yes. Announce that Ellis Global Partners is withdrawing from the merger due to discriminatory treatment experienced by its CEO on a Skyway's air flight. The world should know why." Gasps echoed through the cabin. Linda staggered back slightly, her hand gripping the headrest of a nearby seat. "Mr. Ellis, please, think about the consequences, for both sides." Jordan's eyes hardened. "I am thinking about the consequences. Not for me. For every person who has been humiliated in silence. For every passenger who has been treated as an intruder in spaces they had every right to occupy. Those consequences have been ignored for too long." Alicia whispered fiercely into her phone. "He's not just fighting for himself. He's fighting for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong." Officer Ramirez sighed, his shoulders easing. "Sir, as far as we're concerned, you are fully within your rights to stay seated. We're going to step back, but if anyone here tries to escalate further, we'll intervene." With that, both officers retreated slightly, no longer a threat but a quiet acknowledgement of Jordan's authority. Rebecca looked lost, her eyes darting around the cabin. Linda's confidence had drained completely. Thomas sat shrinking into himself, his earlier dominance turned into humiliation. The hierarchy of the cabin had inverted, and everyone felt it. Jordan turned to face the cabin, his voice calm yet powerful. "I didn't plan for this moment. I boarded this plane like any other traveler, seeking rest, seeking peace. But dignity is not a request, it is a right. And when that right is denied, silence is complicity. I will not be complicit. A swell of applause rose again, stronger than before. Some passengers stood to clap. Others raised their phones higher to capture the moment. Alicia's live stream viewer count surged past 50,000. Comments flooding the feed. History in motion. This man is a legend. Skyway's air will never live this down. Jordan leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. The storm had not passed. It was only beginning. But for the first time that day, he felt something like peace. He had refused to yield. He had turned humiliation into power. And now, the world was watching. The engines hummed louder, a steady vibration that seemed to echo the cabin's collective heartbeat. Boarding had finally ended. The jet bridge was pulled back, the cabin door sealed. The aircraft was no longer tethered to the terminal. Everyone inside knew they were about to rise together, bound by the turbulence of a story far greater than the journey from New York to Los Angeles. Jordan Ellis remained in seat 1A, composed as ever. He had weathered storms in boardrooms, endured skepticism in corporate circles, faced subtle exclusions at banquets and galas, but never had his private battles unfolded so publicly. Never had his quiet resistance been magnified by dozens of cameras and tens of thousands of live-stream viewers. Rebecca Sloan walked briskly through the aisle. Her voice strained as she repeated the safety script. Her once-practiced rhythm faltered. Every word sounded forced, her tone breaking under the weight of eyes that no longer saw her as a figure of authority, but as the catalyst of a scandal. She avoided looking at Jordan. Linda Carver had retreated into the galley, whispering urgently into her phone. Snippets drifted out PR disaster, stock prices collapsing, legal team already alerted. Her words carried the desperation of someone trying to hold water in her hands as it slipped through her fingers. Thomas Granger slumped into his reclined seat, arms crossed, jaw tight. His face was pale. His earlier smugness drowned in humiliation. He avoided the gaze of other passengers, but he could feel their eyes on him, heavy and condemning. For the first time in years, his platinum card, his status, his certainty of privilege offered him no shield. The plane began to taxi. The gentle lurch forward was a reminder that time would not pause, even for a scandal this explosive. The world outside the windows blurred, but inside the cabin, the tension thickened. Alicia Monroe steadied her phone, whispering into her stream. "We're moving now. This flight is taking off with history on board. Remember this moment. Remember this man." The number in the corner of her screen climbed steadily. 70,000, 80,000, 90. The world was watching. Jordan closed his eyes for a brief moment, inhaling deeply. The vibrations of the engines ran through his body, grounding him. He thought of his parents again, of the sacrifices etched into their lives. His father's long hours at the steel mill, his mother's quiet prayers before bed. He thought of his younger self, sitting in classrooms where teachers assumed his brilliance was a fluke, not the result of discipline and determination, and he thought of every closed door he had forced open with patience and persistence. Now, here he was, not in a boardroom, not on a stage, but on an airplane, his dignity contested in the cramped space between rows of leather seats. The plane lifted from the ground, the force pressing passengers back into their chairs. As the wheels left the earth, Jordan felt a symbolic weight shift. He was not just rising physically, but spiritually, lifted by the momentum of resistance turned into strength. Once the seatbelt sign pinged off, conversations broke out. I can't believe they did that to him. It's unbelievable. No, it's predictable. That's the problem. This video is everywhere already. My sister just texted me she saw the live stream. Jordan heard it all. But he remained still, his calmness unshaken. Rebecca passed by his seat with a tray of drinks, her hands trembling slightly. She placed a glass of water on his tray table without meeting his eyes. "For you, sir?" Jordan studied her, his gaze steady. "Thank you." The simple courtesy, delivered without anger or sarcasm, unsettled her more than any rebuke. She hurried away, across the aisle. Alicia lowered her phone briefly. "Mr. Ellis, may I ask you something?" He turned toward her, his expression softening. "Of course. Why didn't you just tell them right away who you are, that you're the CEO, that you're in the middle of a massive deal? It would have shut this all down." Jordan's eyes flicked to the notebook still open on his lap. "Because this isn't about who I am. It's about what I represent. If I had pulled rank from the beginning, they would have written it off as an exception. Just another powerful man throwing his weight around. But this fight, it's not about exceptions. It's about the rule. The rule that says people like me are questioned first and believed last." Alicia's eyes shimmered with tears. She lifted her phone again, whispering to her audience. "You heard him. This isn't just his story. It's ours." From behind them, a passenger spoke up. "Mr. Ellis." Jordan turned slightly. It was the silver-haired woman who had defended him earlier. Her voice was gentle but strong. "Thank you for not yielding. My grandson, he's biracial. He's 12. I want him to grow up in a world where he doesn't have to prove he belongs. Thank you for carrying this fight." Jordan inclined his head respectfully. "I carry it because others carried it before me, and because one day he will not have to." The cabin grew quiet again, not with tension, but with reflection. The hum of the engines filled the space where once there had been conflict, but Jordan knew the fight was far from over. The airline would retaliate. Lawyers would circle. Media outlets would spin the story in every direction, some twisting it, others elevating it. His board would question his decision, shareholders would panic, and his enemies in the corporate world would seize the moment to weaken him. Inside, a storm raged quietly. He doubted himself for a flicker of a moment. Had he gone too far? Was this the right battlefield to make his stand? Could the fallout cost his employees, his company, his vision? He closed his eyes again and let the doubt wash through him like turbulence. His father's voice rose from memory, steady as ever. "Do not confuse peace with silence. Sometimes you must choose the storm, if the storm leads to truth." Jordan opened his eyes. Resolve returned. The storm was here, and he would weather it. Alicia's phone buzzed loudly. She gasped. "It's trending. You're trending worldwide." She looked up at him, almost breathless. #Jordan Ellis. Everyone is talking about this flight. He gave a small nod, his voice quiet. "Good. Let them talk. Let them see." At that moment, the intercom crackled. The captain's voice came through, steady but heavy. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are aware of the situation that has unfolded in our cabin. On behalf of the airline, I want to apologize to Mr. Ellis and to all passengers who witnessed this incident. This is not who we are." A hush fell. Some passengers shook their heads, unimpressed by the late apology. Others exchanged knowing glances. Jordan listened, his face unreadable. When the announcement ended, he whispered almost to himself, "It is exactly who you are, but it does not have to be." His words were quiet, but Alicia caught them, repeating them softly into her phone. You heard him. It does not have to be. The plane soared higher, breaking through a layer of clouds into clear blue sky. The turbulence eased, but everyone on board knew the real turbulence waited on the ground. Jordan leaned back, sipping his water, gathering his strength. The fight was not finished. It had only just taken flight. At 30,000 feet, the aircraft cruised smoothly above the clouds, but below, the world was shaking. Jordan Ellis sat quietly in seat 1A, his notebook still open on his lap, the word dignity written across the page like a mantra. He sipped his water slowly, aware that though the cabin had grown quieter, the storm outside was only intensifying. Alicia Munro's phone vibrated nonstop in her hand. Notifications poured in so fast she could barely keep up. She scrolled, eyes wide. Oh my God, it's everywhere. CNN just picked it up. BBC has it. Hashtag Jordan Ellis has hit #1 trending worldwide. The clip of you refusing to move has already hit 1 million views. Passengers nearby leaned in, whispering to each other, their own phones buzzing with alerts. A man in business attire frowned at his screen. My wife just texted me. She saw the live stream and asked if I was on this flight. It's blowing up everywhere, another passenger murmured. This is going to change everything. Jordan remained calm, though inside, he felt the gravity of the moment pressing against his chest. He had fought countless battles in silence, behind polished boardroom doors, but this was different. This was raw, exposed, undeniable. For once, the world was not hearing about injustice secondhand. It was watching it unfold in real time. Rebecca Sloan moved stiffly down the aisle, her tray shaking as she collected glasses. She avoided every camera pointed in her direction. Her hands trembled, her jaw tight. She had never imagined a routine flight could turn into a global stage. And now she was a villain in a play she never intended to star in. Linda Carver stayed hidden in the galley, her voice hoarse from back-to-back phone calls. The corporate offices were in chaos. The board was demanding answers. Legal was warning of liability. PR was drafting statements that already sounded hollow against the tidal wave of viral outrage. Linda clutched the phone tighter, her forehead pressed against the metal wall, praying for a way out that didn't exist. Thomas Granger hunched into his seat, wishing he could vanish into the upholstery. His earlier bravado haunted him now, replayed endlessly on the screens of strangers across the world. His voice, dripping with entitlement. His words about who belonged in first class, they were now etched into the digital record forever. He could already imagine the fallout, colleagues whispering, clients walking away, his reputation collapsing under the weight of his own prejudice. Alicia's voice broke the silence again. Mr. Ellis, do you want to say something to the world they're all watching? Hundreds of thousands now. Jordan looked at her phone, at the glowing lens capturing his every move. His instinct was to recoil. He had spent his life controlling narratives carefully, building his image with precision. But something inside told him this was not a moment for polished statements. It was a moment for truth. He nodded once. Alicia angled the phone toward him. Jordan's voice was calm, steady, deliberate. To everyone watching, know this. What happened to me today is not new. It happens every day to people with less power, with no cameras, with no audience to bear witness. The difference is that today, you're watching, and now you must ask yourself, what will you do with what you have seen? His eyes shifted toward Rebecca briefly, then back to the camera. This is not just about one man and one seat on one plane. This is about the daily indignities, the quiet humiliations, the assumptions that strip people of their humanity. I did not resist for myself. I resisted for the countless who endure in silence. If you carry anything from this moment, let it be this dignity is not negotiable. Not mine. Not yours. Not anyone's. A hush filled the cabin. Alicia's screen exploded with hearts, comments, applause emojis. This man speaks truth. History in the making. Share this everywhere. Passengers clapped softly, some wiping tears from their eyes. Even those who had not spoken until now felt the weight of his words. The silver-haired woman across the aisle whispered to herself, "Yes, yes." Rebecca froze halfway down the aisle, her chest tightening. For the first time since the confrontation began, she felt the crushing reality of what she had done. The authority she had leaned on so easily now felt flimsy, corrupted. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, to explain, but no words came. She knew nothing, she said, could erase the truth Jordan had just spoken. Linda emerged from the galley, her face pale, her composure shattered. She leaned toward Rebecca and whispered harshly, "We need damage control. Now." Rebecca's eyes flicked toward Jordan, then back to Linda. "What do you want me to do?" "He's not wrong." Linda's jaw tightened. "That doesn't matter. What matters is survival. Do you want to lose your job? Because if this keeps going, you will." Rebecca swallowed hard, shame crawling up her throat. She had never felt smaller. Meanwhile, Thomas tapped furiously on his phone, typing frantic messages. His hands shook as replies came back, silence, avoidance, polite refusals to engage. His network, once a fortress, was crumbling. He imagined the boardrooms where his name was already being whispered with disgust. He imagined being remembered not for his deals, not for his successes, but for this moment, replayed endlessly online. The intercom crackled again. The captain's voice returned, strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I apologize for the events that occurred earlier. I ask for your patience as we do everything we can to ensure a safe and respectful journey moving forward." His words fell flat. No one clapped. No one nodded. The apology sounded like paper against a roaring fire. Jordan leaned back, eyes closed for a moment. His inner storm churned. He knew his words were being broadcast across the world, that people were already painting him as both hero and agitator. He wondered what his board would say, what his shareholders would demand. Would they see his stand as an act of courage or as recklessness that endangered the company he wrestled with doubt? His mind a battlefield. He had always played the long game, calculating risk and reward with precision, but this was different. This was raw, messy, uncontrolled, and yet, in his heart, he felt something he had rarely allowed himself to feel: liberation. He opened his eyes again and looked around the cabin. Faces stared back, some filled with admiration, some with guilt, some with fear, but all were awake, no longer lulled by the quiet comfort of privilege. They had seen, they had heard, and they could no longer unsee or unhear. Alicia's phone buzzed again. She gasped. "Mr. Ellis, the White House just released a statement. They said they are monitoring the incident and will be contacting you directly." The cabin erupted, gasps, murmurs, even laughter of disbelief. The ripple of this moment had reached the highest office in the country. Jordan exhaled slowly, steadying himself. The stakes had grown even higher, but his resolve did not waver. The storm was no longer his alone. The world had entered the cabin with him, and the world was demanding change. The sky outside the windows stretched endlessly blue, but inside the cabin, it felt as though lightning had struck and was still rumbling through every row. The plane moved smoothly across the air, yet everyone knew the turbulence of what was unfolding would be far greater than any storm in the atmosphere. Jordan Ellis sat upright in seat 1A, his expression calm, but his mind heavy. He had spoken to the world through Alicia Monroe's live stream, and the world had answered back with a roar. Notifications, statements, and reactions were spiraling faster than any one person could track. Passengers scrolled their phones in disbelief. A young man in row 4 whispered to his neighbor, "There are already protests forming outside Skyway's air headquarters. People are chanting his name. It's everywhere." Another leaned across the aisle, shaking his head. "It hasn't even been an hour." Rebecca Sloane's hands shook as she stacked used cups onto a tray. The clinking of glass betrayed her nerves. She could feel the weight of every passenger's gaze, every sideways glance that reminded her she had become the symbol of something ugly. Her training manuals had never prepared her for this, the feeling of being judged not as a professional, but as the face of discrimination captured and replayed to millions. In the galley, Linda Carver gripped her phone so tightly her knuckles whitened. The voice on the other end was from headquarters. "Linda, do you understand the scale of this? Shareholders are furious. The board is in crisis talks. The CEO himself wants a direct report as soon as that plane lands." "I understand," Linda whispered, her throat tight. "But it wasn't me who made the call to remove him. It was Rebecca. Deflecting won't save you." The voice snapped back. "Damage control isn't about blame. It's about survival. Get him to back down. Whatever it takes. Do you understand?" Linda's breath caught. "He's not backing down." The line went dead. She closed her eyes, pressing the phone to her forehead, realizing just how powerless she had become. Meanwhile, Thomas Granger tapped furiously at his screen, his face red with frustration. "This is insane," he muttered. "My name is all over this too. Do you see what they're saying about me? They're calling me a racist. They're dragging my company into this." No one around him answered. The silence was louder than any response. Thomas felt the isolation like a physical weight pressing on his chest. His whole life he had walked into rooms expecting deference. Now, for the first time, he was invisible and it burned. Jordan leaned back, breathing evenly, but inside, conflict raged. He thought of his board of directors. Some would applaud his courage, others would rage at the risk he had placed the company under. Investors were fickle, and markets were merciless. Would Ellis Global Partners pay a price for his refusal to bow? His phone buzzed again. He answered quietly, placing it on speaker. His COO's voice filled the cabin. "Jordan, you should know there's backlash forming, too. Not everyone is celebrating. Some outlets are painting you as reckless, saying you weaponized your position to humiliate the airline. Politicians are splitting down predictable lines. Some are praising you. Others are calling it a stunt. The battle lines are being drawn." Jordan closed his eyes briefly. "Of course they are. The truth always threatens those who profit from the lie. The COO hesitated. "What do you want us to do?" Jordan's reply was measured. "Stay the course. Integrity is not a strategy. It's a necessity. We will not bend because the noise is loud. We bend when we are wrong, and we are not wrong." Alicia's hand trembled slightly as she steadied her phone, catching every word. Tears gathered in her eyes. She whispered into the lens, "Do you hear that he's not backing down? Not even now." Rebecca passed nearby, unable to resist speaking. Her voice was low, almost a plea. "Mr. Ellis, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I was doing my job." Jordan turned to her, his eyes steady but not cruel. "Your job is to ensure safety and respect. Instead, you ensured humiliation. Ask yourself why you saw me as a risk when I was sitting quietly in my seat. That answer will tell you everything." Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to defend, to insist it wasn't about race, that it was about procedure. But the truth was clear even to her now. The procedure had been twisted by her assumptions. She turned away, tears stinging her eyes. Linda approached Jordan cautiously, her corporate armor cracking. "Mr. Ellis," she said quietly, her voice tight, "the company is ready to offer you compensation for what happened. We can discuss a settlement when we land. If you could release a statement softening your position, it would help everyone." Jordan studied her carefully. "A settlement. You think this is about money?" Linda blinked, caught off guard. Most people don't sit where I sit." Jordan interrupted. "Most people don't have the leverage I do, and that's the point. This fight is not about settling privately. It's about exposing publicly, because every settlement keeps the system intact, and the system is the problem." Passengers around them nodded subtly. The silver-haired woman whispered, "Amen." Linda's composure cracked further. "You don't understand. If this continues, the airline could collapse. Thousands of jobs are at risk." Jordan's voice lowered, heavy with conviction. "Then perhaps the collapse is overdue. If a company cannot survive without discrimination embedded in its veins, then what exactly are we preserving?" Linda's mouth opened, then closed again. She had no answer. Meanwhile, social media feeds continued to explode. The hashtag was now joined by others. "Dignity is not negotiable." "Flying while black," "Use Skyways scandal." News tickers flashed live updates. Commentators were already dividing along ideological lines. Supporters hailed Jordan as a hero, a symbol of strength and justice. Critics accused him of grandstanding, of using his wealth and power to play victim. Alicia read some of the comments aloud softly, her voice filled with awe. "They're calling you the voice of a movement. Some are saying this is the modern Montgomery bus moment." Jordan shook his head gently. "I'm just a man who refused to move. The movement belongs to all of us." The plane hummed onward, cutting through the sky. But inside, the battle lines of a larger war were being drawn in real time. Support and backlash, praise and condemnation, solidarity and denial. It was all there, pulsing through phones, spilling onto televisions, threading its way into the consciousness of millions. And Jordan Ellis, sitting silently in 1A, understood that his refusal to stand was not the end of the fight. It was the beginning. The plane cut through the sky at 35,000 feet, but the ground below was already on fire. Screens glowed in newsrooms, hashtags surged, and headlines spread like wildfire. Jordan Ellis remained seated in 1A, outwardly calm, though he could feel the shifting tide pressing harder with each passing minute. His words had left the cabin, and now they belonged to the world. Alicia Monroe's live stream had ballooned to over 500,000 viewers. She scrolled, her face pale with awe. It's everywhere now. Every network, every outlet. Fox News is spinning it one way, CNN another. Social media is split right down the middle. You're the headline. Mr. Ellis, passengers murmured as they refreshed their feeds. The silver-haired woman clutched her phone, whispering, "My daughter just sent me a clip of you speaking." She said she cried watching it. Jordan closed his notebook slowly, folding his hands over it. He felt the magnitude of what was happening, but he also felt the fragility of the truth once it entered the chaos of media. Truth was rarely allowed to stand alone. It was dressed up, stripped down, twisted into shapes that fit agendas. And now, his truth was becoming everyone's battleground. Rebecca Sloan moved stiffly down the aisle, her smile forced, her voice mechanical as she asked passengers if they needed anything. Her mind was elsewhere. On the phone call she knew awaited her once they landed. Would she be suspended? Fired, dragged across screens as the face of a company's failure. Every time she caught a glimpse of a camera turned her way, her stomach clenched tighter. Thomas Granger sat hunched, his phone lighting up with messages he didn't want to read. His assistant texted, "Clients are pulling meetings. PR says we need to release a statement immediately." His chest tightened. A single moment, a careless comment, had destroyed decades of cultivated prestige. He had thought his status untouchable. Now, it was ash. In the galley, Linda Carver whispered urgently into her phone, "I don't know how to contain it. He won't bend. He's already framing this as a fight bigger than himself." The voice on the other end was curt. Then you frame it differently. Shift blame, redirect attention. Do not let him control the narrative. Linda hung up, staring at her reflection in the metal panel. For years she had been the problem solver, the fixer. But this was a wildfire, and she had only a paper cup of water in her hands. Meanwhile, the cabin was buzzing with passengers exchanging stories. A man in row 6 whispered, "I just saw a panel of commentators arguing about it live. Some are calling him a hero. Others are saying he's exploiting the system." A woman replied, "Exploiting." He sat in his paid seat and refused to be humiliated. How is that exploitation? Their voices carried just enough for Jordan to hear. He didn't respond, but the words settled into his chest. Support and backlash, two waves crashing against each other, and he stood in the middle. Alicia glanced at him, her eyes full of concern. How do you feel, knowing half the world is defending you and the other half is tearing you apart? Jordan inhaled deeply, then let it out slowly. Truth doesn't require popularity. It requires persistence. I didn't resist because I wanted applause. I resisted because silence is no longer an option. Her throat tightened as she whispered into her stream. He's not here to be liked. He's here to be heard. The intercom buzzed. The captain's voice returned, more careful than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are aware of the continued attention surrounding this incident. We want to reassure all passengers that your safety and comfort remain our top priority. We ask for calm and cooperation for the remainder of this flight." The announcement landed hollow. Comfort was not the word anyone would use for this flight. Jordan's phone buzzed again. He answered. Speaker on. This time, It was his head of public relations. Her voice was sharp, professional, and urgent. "Jordan, the storm is growing faster than expected. You're being painted as both a civil rights hero and a corporate opportunist. Some are even calling for boycotts of Skyway's Air. Others calling for boycotts of Ellis Global Partners. We need to control this before it spins completely out of hand." Jordan closed his eyes for a brief moment. We don't control storms, we endure them. And sometimes we let them do their work. His PR head pushed back, but there are livelihoods at stake. Employees, families, you're making yourself a target, and, by extension, the company. Jordan's voice sharpened, though it never rose. If the price of truth is becoming a target, then so be it. We will not beg for acceptance by betraying our own dignity. There was silence on the line, then a resigned sigh, then "I'll prepare for war." The line clicked off. Alicia whispered, "You just declared war on a system." Jordan shook his head gently. "The system declared war on dignity a long time ago. I'm just refusing to surrender." The silver-haired woman leaned forward, her eyes bright. "You sound like Martin. You sound like Rosa. History repeats itself because people forget. Maybe you're here to remind them." Jordan's chest tightened with emotion, but he remained composed. "I'm just a man on a plane, refusing to give up a seat I paid for. The rest, that's up to the world." The world, however, was already making its choice. In newsrooms across the country, headlines flashed, "Black CEO vs. Skyway's the $500 million meltdown hero, or troublemaker America divided on Jordan Ellis first class. Second class treatment, the Skyway scandal on talk shows, pundits sparred." One commentator shouted, "He's using his wealth to play victim. Ordinary people can't do what he's doing." Another countered fiercely, "That's exactly the point. He's showing what happens even when a man at the top of society faces discrimination. If it happens to him, imagine what happens to those without his power." Protests began to swell in major cities. Crowds held signs, "Dignity is not negotiable," and "We stand with Jordan." Chants echoed against the glass towers of corporate headquarters, and in quieter corners of the internet, resistance brewed. Anonymous accounts spread counter-narratives, doctored clips, smears about Jordan's past. They tried to twist his words, paint him as dangerous, ungrateful, divisive. The digital battlefield was alive, and the war for the story had begun. Back in the cabin, Jordan's heart wrestled with doubt. He remembered his board members' faces, the cautious ones, the skeptical ones. He imagined the calls they were making now, wondering if his stand was bravery or betrayal of their trust. He thought of his employees, the thousands who depended on Ellis Global Partners for their livelihoods. Would they see him as their protector or as the man who endangered their stability? The weight pressed down hard. For a moment, he wondered if silence would have been easier. If giving up his seat, swallowing the humiliation, and bearing the moment deep inside would have spared all this chaos. But then he remembered the faces of those who had endured humiliation with no cameras, no live streams, no voice. His mother at the diner counter. His father pulled over in a car too nice for his skin color. The countless unrecorded indignities that piled like invisible bricks on the shoulders of generations. No. Silence was never easier. Silence was a slow death. He sat taller, gripping his notebook once more. The word dignity stared back at him. It was not just a word. It was the path. The engines roared softly outside, steady against the high-altitude winds. Inside, the storm of voices, stories, and headlines raged on, and Jordan Ellis, alone in his seat, yet watched by millions, knew this was no longer a moment. It was a movement. At 35,000 feet, the plane hummed forward with quiet steadiness, but the world below was erupting. Screens across airports, hotel lobbies, coffee shops, and living rooms flashed the same images Jordan Ellis seated calmly in first class, refusing to give up his seat. His words, "Dignity is not negotiable," had become a rallying cry. But, while the world debated, Skyways Air was preparing to strike back. Linda Carver's phone vibrated again. She stepped into the galley, her voice low and urgent. "Yes, I understand. He won't bend. I've tried. He's refusing a settlement." On the other end, a corporate executive's voice was sharp as a blade. "Then we escalate. We're drafting a statement right now that will frame this as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. We'll stress that our crew acted in the interest of safety. We'll emphasize his disruptive behavior. Public perception is fluid. We can flip this." Linda's stomach twisted. She thought of the calm way Jordan had sat, the steady tone of his voice. Nothing about him had been disruptive. Yet here she was, complicit in the crafting of a lie. She whispered, "But there are hundreds of witnesses on this plane, and the live stream we control narratives." "Linda," the voice snapped, "not facts, narratives. Facts are fragile. Narratives endure. Get ready. By the time you land, the counterattack will be underway." The line went dead. Linda pressed her forehead to the wall, her breath uneven. For the first time in her career, she felt like a pawn in a game where truth no longer mattered. Meanwhile, Jordan sat still, though inside, his mind was racing. He knew how corporations worked. He had spent years in boardrooms where narratives were polished to shine, no matter the truth. He had seen scandals buried under careful press releases, apologies crafted not for sincerity but for optics. He knew Skyways would not surrender quietly. They would fight with the tools of power, money, influence, and media. Alicia Monroe was still glued to her phone, whispering updates to those around her. "Mr. Ellis, they're already pushing back. Look at this." She held the phone out. A news alert scrolled across the screen. Skyways statement: "Crew acted to protect safety of all passengers. Incident mischaracterized online." Murmurs rippled through the cabin. A man muttered, "Safety." He was sitting in his seat. "What safety risk?" The silver-haired woman shook her head, anger flashing in her eyes. "They're trying to rewrite what we all saw." Thomas Granger leaned forward suddenly, desperation in his voice. "This is how it works. They'll spin it. They'll bury the truth. By tomorrow, people will be doubting what they saw with their own eyes." For the first time since the incident began, Thomas sounded less arrogant and more afraid. He knew how narratives could shift. He had built his career on them. And now he saw the machinery turning against Jordan, but also against himself. Jordan exhaled slowly. "Let them spin. The truth is bigger than their script, and the truth has already left this plane." But his heart was not as steady as his words. He knew the truth could be drowned, twisted, packaged into something unrecognizable. He had seen it happen to others. Could it happen to him? Could the firestorm of support fade into doubt, leaving him branded not as a man of dignity but as a disruptive opportunist? Rebecca Sloan passed nearby, her tray empty, her voice barely above a whisper. "They'll throw me under the bus. won't they?" Jordan looked at her, his eyes steady. "They'll protect the system, not the people. That's how it always works." Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, but she knew he was right. She had been a loyal employee for years, following procedure, playing by the rules. Yet, in this moment, she realized the company would not shield her. She would be the sacrificial offering, the scapegoat to preserve the larger machine. In the rows behind, passengers debated openly now. A young woman said, "I don't care what Skyways says. I was here. I saw it. They can't gaslight us." A man countered, "They don't need to convince us. They just need to convince the millions who weren't here." That's how propaganda works. The words stung because they were true. Jordan felt the weight of it pressing on him. He could fight with his presence, with his voice, but he could not outspend or outmaneuver the war chest of a multinational airline. They had teams of lawyers, PR experts, and lobbyists. He had his conviction, a live stream, and the unpredictable tide of public opinion. His phone buzzed again. It was his general counsel, her tone clipped and urgent. "Jordan, Skyways is preparing to sue. They're claiming defamation, loss of revenue, reputational damage. They want to paint you as the aggressor. We're already drafting counter-arguments, but you need to understand they're coming hard." Jordan closed his eyes, his voice low. "Of course they are. They can't afford to lose this battle. For them, it's not just about me. It's about preserving the precedent. If one man proves they can't strip dignity at will, then every passenger becomes harder to control." The general counsel hesitated. "We can fight, but this will not be clean. They'll dig into your life, your history, your family. They'll try to smear you." Jordan's hand clenched into a fist against his thigh. He thought of his parents, of the quiet life they still lived back in Chicago. He imagined headlines dragging their names into a war they had never asked for. The thought cut deeper than any personal attack. Still, he steadied his voice. "Let them dig. I have nothing to hide. What they'll find is not weakness. It's the foundation that made me who I am." When he ended the call, he stared out the window at the endless blue. His reflection looked back at him in the glass, calm, composed, yet shadowed by the weight of the storm. Alesha whispered, almost to herself, "This isn't just a scandal anymore. It's a war of worlds, his world versus theirs." The plane pressed forward, every mile carrying them closer to a landing, not just in an airport, but into a battlefield of cameras, statements, lawsuits, and protests. Jordan Ellis sat still, his notebook open again, the word dignity underlined twice now. He knew what awaited him. He knew the counterattack had begun. And he knew the real battle was only just starting. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the captain's voice filled the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our initial descent into San Francisco. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for landing." But this was no ordinary descent. Everyone on board felt it. They weren't just landing in a city, they were landing in the heart of a storm. Jordan Ellis sat upright, shoulders squared, notebook still resting on his lap. His mind was clear, but his pulse thudded with the weight of what was waiting beyond the runway. Through the oval window, the sun painted streaks of orange across the horizon, the kind of view that usually inspired peace. Tonight, it felt like the sky was on fire. Around him, passengers whispered nervously. Phones buzzed with updates, notifications, breaking news. The live stream counter ticked into the millions. Alicia Monroe held her phone steady, her eyes wide with both fear and determination. "They're saying media is already waiting at the gate," she whispered. "Dozens of reporters, cameras, protesters, and security. A lot of security." The silver-haired woman leaned closer, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "Don't let them rattle you, Mr. Ellis. They'll try to twist it, but people saw. We saw. That matters." Jordan gave her a slight nod, appreciating the solidarity. Yet, deep inside, he wrestled with the question that had been circling his mind for hours. Would truth survive once the machine of power and spin took over? Rebecca Sloane moved stiffly through the aisle, her eyes darting nervously, her chest tightened with each announcement, each vibration of her phone with messages she couldn't bear to open. She knew the moment they landed, everything would change. Her name, her face, her mistake, it would all be dissected. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears as she collected stray cups, her voice faint. Trash. Anyone. Thomas Granger sat slumped in his seat, his phone buzzing nonstop. His assistant's latest message glared at him. "Investors are fleeing. We're trending for all the wrong reasons. You need to release a statement before landing." He typed furiously, then deleted, then typed again. Nothing sounded right. Every word felt like it could bury him deeper. For a man who once thrived on control, this was chaos he couldn't tame. The plane jolted slightly as the wheels lowered, the hum of the engines deepening. Silence fell across the cabin. For many, this was the most anxious landing they had ever experienced. The wheels screeched against the tarmac, the cabin rattled, and then the plane slowed into a steady roll. Relief flickered briefly, but it was quickly replaced by tension. Everyone knew the real turbulence was waiting just beyond the jet bridge. As the plane taxied, Linda Carver's phone buzzed again. She read the message, her face pale. "Security teams are positioned. You'll escort Mr. Ellis off the plane. Cameras are everywhere. Handle it carefully." Her hands trembled as she slipped the phone back into her pocket. Handle it carefully. What did that even mean when the entire world was already watching? The plane finally came to a halt. The familiar ding sounded. Seatbelts clicked. Passengers shifted restlessly. But no one stood up. Everyone's eyes were on Jordan Ellis. Alicia whispered into her stream. "This is it. The moment." Rebecca approached Jordan hesitantly, her voice cracking. "Mr. Ellis, before we open the doors, I want to say, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. I saw what I was taught to see." Jordan met her eyes, his expression softening for the first time since the ordeal began. Recognition is the beginning, not the end. What you do next, that's what matters. Her throat tightened, tears blurring her vision. She nodded faintly and stepped back. The cabin door opened with a metallic hiss. The sounds from outside flooded in the hum of cameras, the bark of security radios, the chants of protesters echoing through the terminal. Linda Carver entered the cabin first, her professional smile plastered tightly, though her eyes betrayed panic. She spoke loudly, her voice meant for the cameras already flashing. "Mr. Ellis, if you'll come with me, we've arranged a private exit to ensure your comfort and safety." Jordan remained seated, his gaze steady. A private exit. To hide me away from the truth, cameras clicked rapidly, capturing every word. Linda's smile faltered. "It's standard procedure." Jordan rose slowly, his presence filling the cabin. "No, the truth does not leave through the back door. I'll walk through the same gate as every other passenger. Let the world see." Passengers erupted into murmurs, some clapping softly, others nodding. Alicia whispered into her phone, "He's refusing the back door. He's walking into the fire." Security officers shifted uneasily outside the door, waiting for orders. Linda tried once more, her voice strained. "Please, Mr. Ellis, this isn't wise. They'll twist it." Jordan's voice cut through, calm but firm. "They've already twisted it. I won't help them tie the knot." And with that, he stepped into the aisle. The silver-haired woman placed a hand over her heart, whispering, "God bless you." Rebecca leaned against the wall, silent tears streaming down her face. Thomas looked away, shame burning his cheeks. Jordan walked slowly down the aisle, each step heavy with purpose. Alicia followed close behind, live streaming, her voice trembling. "He's walking. He's not hiding. The whole world is watching." When he reached the cabin door, the flash of cameras blinded him for a moment. Shouts rang out. "Mr. Ellis, do you regret your actions? Are you canceling the deal with Skyways? Do you think this was about race or class?" He raised his hand slightly, and the crowd hushed just enough. His voice carried, steady, deliberate. This was about dignity, and dignity will never be negotiable. The chants outside grew louder. Protesters shouted his name. Security tried to form a wall, but the noise surged past them. The air was electric, charged with anger, hope, and the weight of history repeating itself in a new form. Jordan walked forward, each camera flash capturing his resolve, each step echoing the stand he had taken miles above the earth. For a brief moment, he thought of his father's words, the silence that could be sharper than a shout, and he realized something profound. This was not silence. This was a roar carried on the shoulders of millions who had been silenced too long. He kept walking, not toward safety, but toward the confrontation that would decide everything. The terminal was chaos. Cameras flashed like lightning, microphones thrust forward, voices shouted over each other. Protesters held signs high above the crowd. Reporters leaned over stanchions, straining for a sound bite. Security officers barked orders to hold the line, but the tide of people was impossible to fully control. Jordan Ellis stepped through the jet bridge into the blinding storm. For a moment, the noise threatened to swallow him whole, but then he stilled himself, planted his feet, and lifted his chin. He would not be drowned. He would rise above. Alicia Monroe, phone still raised, whispered into her live stream, "He's here. He's facing them head on. This is history." A reporter shouted, "Mr. Ellis, do you regret your actions on the flight?" Another followed instantly. "Are you canceling the Skyways deal?" Jordan raised a hand, the gesture quieting the frenzy by sheer force of presence. His voice carried across the terminal, calm yet thunderous in its conviction. "This was never about one seat. It was never about me alone. This was about dignity, about whether we accept humiliation in silence or demand respect as a birthright." The crowd roared, half in applause, half in protest. Cameras zoomed closer, feeding the image live to millions around the globe. Linda Carver stood off to the side, phone pressed to her ear, corporate orders crackling in her head. She had been told to contain this, to redirect it. But watching Jordan now, she knew there was no containing it. The tide was far bigger than her. Rebecca Sloan emerged slowly from the jet bridge, pale and shaken. Her eyes found Jordan in the sea of faces. and for the first time she understood the magnitude of what she had set in motion. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered to herself, "What have I done?" Thomas Granger pushed through a side exit, shielding his face from cameras. His empire was crumbling, investors had fled, partnerships had collapsed. The man who once embodied privilege now looked like a ghost, hollowed by disgrace, but all eyes remained fixed on Jordan. He continued, his words slicing through the clamor. For too long, corporations have believed they can buy silence, that they can rewrite reality with carefully crafted statements. But dignity is not for sale, not at any price. Not even $500 million. Gasps rippled through the terminal. Alicia's live stream exploded with comments. Did he just say $500 million? He's canceling the deal. This changes everything. Jordan reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew his phone. He pressed a button, and the line connected on speaker. "Edward Kane," he said, voice steady, "CEO of Skyways Air. You're on speaker. The world is listening." The crowd hushed. Even the security officers froze. A clipped voice came through the phone. "Jordan." This isn't the place to Jordan cut him off. His tone sharp with finality. This is exactly the place, right here, right now, where your company humiliated me for daring to sit in the seat I paid for, where your employees treated me as less, where you tried to bury the truth under spin. Edward Kane's voice faltered. "We can discuss this privately." There's no need to. Jordan's eyes swept the sea of faces before him. No. Privacy is the cloak that protects injustice. Today, we end that. The crowd erupted in cheers. Alicia's hand shook as she struggled to keep her phone steady. Jordan spoke clearly, each word a hammer striking steel. "I, Jordan Ellis, CEO of Ellis Global Partners, am canceling our $500 million investment in Skyways Air, effective immediately." The terminal exploded. Reporters shouted questions, passengers cheered, protesters chanted his name. The announcement rippled outward within seconds, lighting up news feeds, triggering headlines, collapsing stock tickers in real time. Edward Kane's voice crackled desperately over the phone. "Jordan, don't do this. Think of your shareholders. Think of the economy. We can make this right." Jordan's jaw tightened. The economy is not an excuse for indignity. You can rebuild your company, but until you rebuild its soul, no deal will save you. He ended the call, slipping the phone back into his pocket. The silence after the click was deafening. Then the terminal erupted again, a roar of history unfolding. Rebecca stumbled forward, her voice breaking. "Mr. Ellis." Jordan looked at her, eyes calm but piercing. "You have a choice, Rebecca, to repeat the cycle or to break it. What you do next will define more than your career. It will define your humanity." She covered her face with her hands, sobbing. For the first time, she saw not just the man she had wronged, but the weight of every injustice carried in his stance. Linda Carver lowered her phone, tears brimming in her eyes. She had been an enforcer of the system, but in this moment she saw its fragility. She whispered to herself, "The machine is breaking." Security officers parted as Jordan stepped forward, not as a man fleeing conflict, but as a man walking into destiny. Protesters reached toward him, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed endlessly. Yet his presence seemed to steady the chaos, to bend it around him. He spoke once more, his voice carrying above the storm. "This is not just my fight. This is our fight. Dignity is the inheritance of every human being, and I will not rest until every corporation, every institution, every system recognizes that truth. Alicia's livestream comments surged into the millions. This is the moment. This is history. Jordan Ellis just changed everything. The silver-haired woman stepped into view, her voice trembling with pride. We were witnesses tonight. The world cannot pretend it didn't happen. They cannot unsee what we saw. Jordan paused, letting the weight of silence settle before he continued. His eyes lifted, not just to the cameras, but to the invisible millions beyond them. Power without purpose fades, but power rooted in dignity will outlast empires. With those words, he turned and walked forward, disappearing into the mass of lights, voices, and history in the making. And, though the terminal swirled with chaos, one truth remained unshakable. A man had refused to surrender his seat, and in doing so, he had claimed something far greater. Not just a seat, not just a deal, but a movement. As the cabin lights dim and the echoes of this story fade, one truth remains: dignity is not negotiable. Jordan Ellis refused to surrender his seat, but more importantly, he refused to surrender his humanity. His strength reminds us that every act of prejudice, no matter how small it seems, carries the power to wound, and every act of courage carries the power to heal. This story is not just about an airline or a deal worth $500 million. It is about all of us, about the silent battles fought in boardrooms, classrooms, and everyday places where dignity is questioned. And it is a call to action to reject the small humiliations that build into walls of injustice, and to stand with those who demand better. May we walk away not just angry, but awakened, not just sympathetic, but committed to change. Because a world without respect is no world at all. If this story moved you, let it move others too.